Welcome to, not Mexico, not yet, but we are close. We're somewhere between Death Valley and Joshua Tree National Park. But there is over 10 days and over 2,500 kilometers between here and when I started. So let me show you how I got here. I started my trip about 3 hours north of Victoria on Vancouver Island. That's on the west coast of Canada. So after I woke up, I made a few stops along the way to get a few last minute essentials, and then I was waiting in line for the Coho, which is the ferry that runs between Canada and Washington State, USA. So the first day of the trip would start with the first border crossing. It honestly felt surreal to finally start the trip after so much planning and contemplation. But after a windy crossing, I drove off the ferry, cleared customs, went to the grocery store to stock up on some food, and by the time everything was done, it was dark, so I headed into Olympic National Park to find somewhere to sleep. That morning, after making breakfast, it started to rain, and at this point I was heading to the west coast to follow the coastline down. After stopping to look at some beaches, I decided to check the weather again at a Wi-Fi stop, and it seemed like the Pacific Northwest weather was finally starting. So it would rain from here down to California pretty much non-stop for the next few days. So I changed plans and cut inside to go further inland away from the coast and the winter weather, driving around the outskirts of Portland and heading for Mount Hood, hoping there'd be a break in the weather where I could get to see it. These first few days were pretty much just driving and sleeping. So again, I made it to camp in the dark, and it was raining a lot, so I decided to make one of my favorite comfort foods after a long day of driving: macaroni and beef. That morning I woke up and thought it was a bit cold, and then it started snowing. So first snow of the year for me, and needless to say, I did not get to see Mount Hood. So I continued driving down the mountain, trying to get out of the rain, and before I knew it, I was on some trails in the high desert of Oregon. Eventually the trails led to this dead-end opening. It was nice to be out of the rain, but I did wake up with frost on the truck, so I continued south. And before I knew it, I was ripping through the open desert of Central Oregon. This was cool. I got to see some coyotes crossing the road, and it was just nice to be out of the Pacific Northwest. I'd spent the last few years in the rainforest. It was just cool to see something new. As I was driving, I saw this flat top looking mountain in the distance, and when I checked the map, sure enough, there were some trails leading up to it. It's called Flat Top Mountain, so I decided to do a bit of off-roading, and I had my lunch up top with a view. So after having lunch and driving back down the mountain, I headed further south and I stopped in a town called Lakeview near the Oregon-California border to restock, and then I headed back into the mountains. I found some trails, and after a while I realized the trail I was on wasn't mapped on the maps I was using. But either way, I was heading in the right direction. It's just this time I could not beat the setting sun. I ended up getting to camp in the dark, and on one of the rough sections off-road, I managed to ding the back left corner of my bumper coming off a ledge. So I fixed it using some techniques I've learned after a few years of owning a Land Cruiser. That morning around 6:30, the cold actually woke me up, and the sleeping setup had finally reached its comfort limit. There was frost and little icicles everywhere. My only award for dealing with the cold was getting to see a beautiful sunset when I started driving out of the mountains. And this was my cross against California, on some back road with no name, and I thought it was kind of funny that I was crossing into California with snow under my tires. Completely unexpected. At this point I was getting tired of waking up in the cold, so I decided I needed to cover some ground, and I kind of spent most of the day driving, went through Susanville, and I went back into the mountains because there were a few things I had to do. First thing is I'm running low on water, so I need to make some more. I've got an MSR Guardian water pump. Pretty compact, weighs less than a pound I think, or just about a pound. And yeah, you just uncoil it. It's got two tubes here, self-cleaning, so one feeds through the filter and the other one just pumps the wastewater out the end of the tube. So pretty simple, you just start pumping, and yeah, I like to get comfortable, and then within a few minutes you've got clean drinking water. So this is a 0.02 micron filter. So MSR says it'll get rid of viruses, bacteria, and pretty much anything else in the water. So far it's all I've been using for water. I haven't bought any otherwise, and this is all I plan on using for a while. So this is the Nemo Helio, and it's a portable shower. Say it gives you 7 minutes of shower time. So you just fill this up, put it in the sun, let it heat up, and then there's a foot pedal to pressurize it, and this is a shower. I've actually never used it, so we'll see. So mostly full. I'm gonna put it on the hood so it heats up. And yeah, we'll see. Yeah, so I didn't take a video of me using the shower, but it worked pretty good. I didn't let it warm up because I was getting impatient and I just wanted to be clean. But after showering, I packed everything up and headed a bit further into the mountains to a more permanent campsite. So I'm about a week into the trip, and I'm camping at Antelope Lake in the Sierra Nevada in Northern California. And it's finally warm enough where I can get the second solar panel out, get the laptop out, and start transferring all the media to the main drive so I can start working on the second video. I kind of just wanted to show you what the setup looks like when I'm somewhere for a day or longer. So I've got the second solar panel out, and it has a 20-foot cable extension that runs into the split connector for the jackery. So the panel on the roof and the fold-out panel are feeding into the system. And it's a little bit overcast, but even overcast, I'm getting well over 100 watts going into the system, which is plenty to run the laptop and do a bit of editing and get everything organized. So the next day I was back on the road, and after stopping at Summit Racing in Reno, Nevada, and talking to a few shops, I got referred to this old school mechanic called Frank. I needed someone to help me fabricate a bracket to mount the transmission cooler, because with all the extra weight, the transmission was starting to run a little warm on the big mountain passes, and it hadn't even gotten hot outside yet. I have to say I'm really impressed with everyone in Reno. Everyone was really nice and super helpful, and they helped me get back on the road pretty much immediately. But by the time everything was all done, it was late, cold, and windy, so this would be my first and so far only stay in a hotel this trip. Soon I was back on the road, heading for Yosemite National Park. Found a trail right outside the park, and it led to this unreal spot. That spot was at an elevation almost 2,000 feet higher than the highest point on Vancouver Island. Needless to say, it was a little bit cold, but the next morning we woke up for sunrise and we were heading into the park. So still tired from the cold, I blasted through Cloud Rest in under 6 hours with 1 bottle of water and no snacks, which was a mistake. After that I went and looked at some of the big sequoias, and that was it for Yosemite National Park. So Yosemite definitely deserves more than a day, but after spending the night in Reno and going through how much I was spending, I realized the States was starting to burn up a bit more money than I'd like to. So I started beelining it for Mexico, and after spending the day in Yosemite, I came back out the east exit and drove into the night for a few hours and found a spot in the dark just using the maps. So I was pretty surprised when I woke up, and this is what I saw. So that brings us here. I'm gonna spend a few days in this spot working on the video and resting up. It's definitely been a challenging few weeks, but also rewarding. I think most of the difficulties are just with the cold. I can't stress enough how much I don't like sleeping in the cold in the tent. But now we're finally in warm weather, so it's getting easier. Death Valley is just off to the east, but most of the roads are closed due to recent flooding, so I'm just gonna bypass it. There's a lot of things in the States that I would have liked to see, and you can spend a lot of time here, but my thought is I can always come back, do an all-American trip. Right now it makes more sense for me to save my money for Central America, Mexico, and hopefully South America. So I'm gonna drive down through Joshua Tree because it's along the way, Joshua Tree National Park. And after that, I'm just gonna spend a few days to get ready for the Mexico crossing. And next time I talk to you, I'll probably be in the Baja, so see you next time.